The sky darkened over every continent as the Vorath fleet descended. Massive ships, like the shadows of doom, blotted out the sun, their gleaming exteriors reflecting the tension below. It was as if the entire world had been plunged into twilight. Governments, militaries, and ordinary citizens had barely begun to comprehend the reality of the threat before the aliens' first broadcast went live. The message was cold and simple, transmitted in every known language. Surrender or perish. Earth is ours now. A chill ran through the hearts of Earth's leaders. The Vorath weren't just threatening. They had the power to back it up. Their ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Weapons of unimaginable force, capable of reducing entire cities to rubble with a single strike. The alien fleet hovered above Earth's atmosphere, a looming reminder of their superiority. Panic swept across the globe. People feared the worst: mass destruction, terror, the end of civilization as they knew it. In the streets there were cries of fear, families huddling together, praying that the destruction wouldn't come. But the response from Earth's governments was swift and surprisingly unified. Military commanders, scientists, and world leaders from every corner of the globe convened for an emergency summit. Their task was clear: survive. For years, Earth had been preparing for a threat like this. Unknown to the Vorath, humanity had developed defense systems and technologies that were far more advanced than anything they had ever expected. In bunkers beneath the surface, weapons programs had been secretly under development. Global defense alliances had already been established, albeit under the guise of normal international peacekeeping operations. As the world leaders met, a sense of resolve began to build. No one knew how they would win, but they refused to surrender. The fear of defeat was overshadowed by something far stronger: pride. Humanity wasn't going to bow to anyone. The United Nations released a statement in response to the Vorath's message. In contrast to the terror-fueled whispers that had taken over every major city, the message was clear, bold, and resolute. We are not your subjects. We are humanity, and we will fight. Behind closed doors, military forces around the world prepared. Satellites were scrambled, planes were deployed, and weapons systems were activated. No one fully understood the Vorath's capabilities, but they knew Earth would not fall without a fight. In the distance, the first strike came. The Vorath's massive warships fired energy beams from orbit, vaporizing major cities in seconds. The skies lit up with fire, the ground shook with the force of the impacts. Yet in that moment, something unexpected happened. Humanity didn't cower. A global resistance, formed out of the ashes of panic, sprang into action. Nations that had once been divided now stood united, their military forces rallying together. The unexpected happened. Humanity's secret weapon was deployed. A network of electromagnetic pulses, designed to neutralize the Vorath's advanced technology, was activated, shutting down their communication systems across the globe. The invaders' arrogance faltered. They had thought they would crush Earth with ease, but now they faced a strange resistance. As their technology went silent, the Vorath were forced to retreat temporarily to regroup. And just like that, in a split second, the invaders realized this wasn't the world they thought they were conquering. Humanity wasn't surrendering. They were fighting back. A tremor of uncertainty rippled through the Vorath's ranks. Earth's leaders exchanged a quiet, knowing glance. The war had only just begun, but humanity had made its first move, and the Vorath would soon understand just how deeply they had underestimated this small, resilient planet. The silence that followed the first human victory was brief but electric. Across the world, governments and military leaders worked together in an unprecedented show of unity. The Vorath had assumed that humanity's response would be chaotic panic. Instead, they found themselves facing a planet that had quickly turned into a determined and unpredictable enemy. The Vorath, caught off guard by the pulse attack, had expected to wipe out Earth's communication infrastructure and create widespread fear. But the EMP had only bought humanity precious hours, and in those few hours, The world had begun to fight back in ways the aliens hadn't foreseen. As the Vorath regrouped, their massive warships began descending on Earth's major cities, deploying drones and assault troops. From above, they unleashed devastating energy beams, leveling whole city blocks in a single flash. The world watched in horror as familiar skylines disappeared in an instant. The Vorath were not here to make peace. They were here to dominate. But humanity wasn't done. The message from Earth's leaders had been clear. We will not fall quietly. Cities that had been struck by the Vorath's initial assault rose from the ashes like embers in a wildfire. In London, Paris, New York, and Tokyo, human ingenuity took center stage. Earth's militaries, equipped with stolen technologies and retooled weapons, launched hit-and-run strikes against the Vorath. They used tactics that had baffled the invading forces, fighting from underground bunkers, blending into urban ruins, and creating false signals that led the aliens into traps. The first significant counterattack came when a coalition of global military forces, under the command of General Elena Rios, executed a surprise ambush on a Vorath battalion near the ruins of Paris. Using reverse-engineered alien technology, humanity had developed advanced weapons that neutralized the Vorath's energy shields. In a harrowing, desperate battle, human forces managed to destroy a Vorath assault ship in low orbit. The result was chaos among the Vorath ranks. Their leaders, used to swift and overwhelming victories, were now faced with a challenge they didn't know how to handle. For the first time, they realized their enemies were not cowards. Humanity's refusal to break under pressure was becoming a force the Vorath couldn't ignore. Back on Earth, the celebrations were short-lived. Though the victory was significant, the war was far from over. The Vorath weren't retreating. They were recalibrating, and their reinforcements were already en route. In secret, the Vorath began to deploy their most terrifying weapon, a planet-destroying bomb capable of erasing entire continents. With humanity's defenses spread thin across multiple fronts, the pressure mounted. The Vorath believed that this final weapon would break humanity's spirit for good. But again, humanity's ingenuity took them by surprise. Dr. Samuel Ruiz, a brilliant but reclusive scientist, uncovered a flaw in the Vorath's weapons design. The device relied on a rare energy crystal found only in specific areas of the Vorath fleet's technology. This discovery became Earth's hope. A daring plan was formed. A specialized team, made up of soldiers, hackers, and scientists, would infiltrate a Vorath flagship, the Kavash, the largest ship in the fleet. They would sabotage the bomb and steal the energy crystal, potentially turning the tide of the war. As the plan went into motion, a sense of urgency and fear settled in. The odds of success were slim, but the stakes were undeniable. The survival of humanity now rested on the shoulders of this mission. No one knew how long they had before the Vorath could deploy their weapon, but it was clear that the fight had only just begun. The Vorath's surprise retreat had been short-lived. Their vast fleet had regrouped, their planet-destroying weapons still primed for launch. But now Earth was in motion, rallying, adapting, and fighting back in ways the Vorath couldn't fathom. Humanity's capacity for quick adaptation had become their most terrifying weapon. The world's forces, in the wake of their first victories, no longer relied solely on conventional methods of war. Instead, they began to fight with strategy, creativity, and brutal efficiency. Guerrilla warfare surged to the forefront, and the Vorath soon realized they were not just battling soldiers, but an entire population. The very cities they had leveled now became a labyrinth of ruins, perfect for ambushes and decoys. Soldiers and civilians alike learned to fight side by side in the chaos, with every individual contributing to the resistance in ways no enemy could anticipate. Dr. Samuel Ruiz's discovery about the Vorath weapon had given humanity a glimmer of hope, but they still needed a way to infiltrate the Kavash, the flagship where the bomb was stored. It was a fortress, heavily guarded, and its defenses were reinforced with technologies far beyond anything Earth had ever encountered. Yet, humanity's resourcefulness shone through. A small, elite team of hackers, military personnel, and scientists began working on a way to bypass the Kavash's systems and disable its security. But the situation on the ground was just as dire. The Vorath had begun deploying biological warfare, poisonous gas, and engineered viruses across key human cities. Humanity fought back not only with guns and bombs, but with countermeasures. Vaccines, antidotes, and defensive measures developed by Earth's brightest minds. What the Vorath did not account for was humanity's resilience in the face of biological and environmental threats. While the Vorath had mastered weaponry, they were no match for humanity's ability to overcome, adapt, and heal. In one of the most harrowing scenes, a small resistance group in Rio de Janeiro was surrounded by Vorath forces. With no hope of reinforcement, they used a makeshift EMP device to bring down the alien drones watching over them. It was a desperate move, but it worked. The resistance fighters used the chaos to launch a counterattack, defeating the invading forces and liberating the city. Word of this victory spread like wildfire, reigniting the fire of resistance across the globe. At the same time, the story of humanity's ingenuity reached the Vorath in ways they hadn't expected. Within their ranks, some began to question the invasion. The Vorath had conquered hundreds of planets, each more advanced than Earth, yet none had ever presented such a challenge. On a secretive, high-ranking meeting aboard a Vorath warship, there was talk of retreating, a subject never broached before. Some commanders argued that the costs of conquest, in both lives and resources, were becoming too great. But the larger part of the Vorath leadership, driven by their centuries-old ethos of domination, refused to back down. They saw humanity's resilience not as an admirable trait, but a weakness to be crushed. As the Vorath began to regroup and build their forces again, another surprise unfolded. Humanity's tech-savvy resistance, led by a brilliant hacker named Amelia John, had managed to infiltrate the Vorath's communication network. They intercepted vital intel on the deployment of Vorath reinforcements, allowing humanity to sabotage alien supply lines, leading to a shocking blow for the invaders. By the time the Vorath realized their strategic vulnerabilities, it was already too late. They had underestimated humanity's potential for surprise, and now the war was escalating into something the aliens hadn't prepared for, a protracted, unpredictable struggle that they were no longer confident they could win. A few key victories, including a critical blow to the Vorath's supply of energy crystals, had shifted the momentum in humanity's favor. But they knew the final battle was approaching, and the war was far from over. The Vorath, determined to make Earth submit, had one last desperate move in mind, a final weapon that humanity couldn't yet fathom. The clock was ticking. Humanity had taken the first steps toward victory, but the final confrontation was coming, and the world would have to unite like never before. The Vorath had never faced an enemy like this before. Their commanders, used to overwhelming their foes with sheer force and terror, were now dealing with a planet that had gone from submission to full-blown resistance in a matter of weeks. The human spirit, unbroken and fierce, had proven to be the most dangerous weapon of all. Despite the alien superiority in technology and firepower, the Vorath were now forced to contend with a determined, united Earth. The initial surprise that humanity had launched a successful counteroffensive was now replaced with a grim realization. The war was no longer one-sided. Humanity had found its rhythm. And with each victory, they grew bolder, more confident, and more willing to fight to the bitter end. As humanity's forces launched more guerrilla attacks and targeted Vorath supply lines, the tide of battle began to shift. The Vorath warships, once an imposing force in orbit, were now under constant threat from Earth's new weaponry. Some of the more daring Earth pilots, utilizing reverse-engineered alien tech, even began taking down Vorath ships in the atmosphere, forcing the invaders to keep a watchful eye on all fronts. The most stunning victory came in a fierce battle outside the remains of Berlin. Earth's combined resistance forces, using a mix of guerrilla tactics and newfound alien technology, managed to disable the Kavash, the flagship of the Vorath fleet. In an all-out assault, A small team of elite soldiers and scientists infiltrated the ship, planting explosives in key systems and disabling the Vorath's power core. The explosion was monumental, shaking the very foundation of the war. The blast was a devastating blow to the Vorath, both in terms of morale and military capability. The Kavesh had been the center of their operations, a symbol of invincibility. With it destroyed, the remaining Vorath fleet was thrown into disarray. But Earth's forces didn't stop there. In a display of audacity, a coalition of global forces launched simultaneous assaults on Vorath strongholds across the world, targeting the remaining high-ranking commanders and alien weapons caches. The Vorath began to splinter, not just from human assault, but from internal fractures. Discontent spread throughout their ranks. Some of their own warriors, disillusioned by the relentless human resistance and the growing realization that their invasion was failing, began to question the war. Whispers of rebellion and defection reached Earth's leaders, and there were reports that some Vorath soldiers were quietly aiding human forces, providing critical intel and supplies. Earth's resistance leaders now found themselves not only fighting the Vorath, but also dealing with the seeds of discord within their own ranks. The emotional toll on both sides was immense. Earth's survivors were beginning to experience the true cost of the war, losses that weighed heavy on the hearts of those who had fought and sacrificed. But in the midst of destruction, there were moments of humanity's brilliance. A resistance medic who saved thousands with a simple vaccine, a scientist who cracked the Vorath code and discovered a flaw in their defense system, civilians who risked their lives to deliver supplies to soldiers behind enemy lines. Every small act of bravery made a world of difference. In the High Council chambers aboard a Vorath warship, the surviving commanders were having a heated debate. The once inevitable conquest of Earth was now a distant dream. Some factions argued for retreat, conceding that Earth was too valuable to destroy completely. Others, however, were determined to finish what they started, at all costs. A decision was made. The Vorath would unleash their ultimate weapon, a doomsday bomb capable of obliterating entire continents. They would not let Earth's resistance stand as a symbol of defiance. But Earth's forces were not without their own secrets. They had been preparing for this. Across the world, military scientists and engineers worked feverishly to create an anti-doomsday weapon. They had discovered the bomb's design and had already begun work on a countermeasure, an energy-based shield that could neutralize the weapon's power. But it was untested, and the clock was ticking. General Elena Rios, one of the Resistance's most respected leaders, knew the stakes had never been higher. This was their last chance to stop the Vorath's destruction and claim victory. The final confrontation was coming, and humanity would face it head-on, united and unyielding. As the Resistance prepared for the inevitable clash, the world held its breath. The Vorath had underestimated humanity's resolve, but now the true test would come. Who would survive, the conquerors or the conquered? The fate of Earth hung in the balance. The skies over Earth were once again darkened by the looming Vorath fleet. But this time, the threat didn't seem as inevitable. The Earthbound resistance forces had gained ground, and humanity's newfound unity and courage were on full display. However, there was little time left before the Vorath would deploy their ultimate weapon, a doomsday bomb that would wipe out entire continents and leave Earth as nothing more than a poisoned, burning husk. Humanity's only hope now lay in the hands of General Elena Rios and the team of scientists who had worked around the clock to create a shield capable of neutralizing the Vorath's devastating weapon. This shield, a complex web of energy-dispersing technology, had been hastily developed, its power untested in combat. If it failed, Earth's resistance would be wiped out in a single cataclysmic blast. The pressure was unbearable, but humanity had no choice but to press on. Elena stood at the front of the command center, her eyes fixed on the holographic display of the approaching Vorath fleet. Thousands of enemy ships were descending on Earth, ready to deliver the final blow. Beside her stood Dr. Samuel Ruse, who had been instrumental in the creation of the countermeasure, and Amelia Zhang, the brilliant hacker who had led humanity's successful cyber assaults on the Vorith's communication networks. Their faces were tired, but there was no room for doubt. "This is it," Alina said, her voice steady. "The shield is ready. It's our last shot." Amelia tapped at a series of consoles, double-checking the shield's calculations. "We'll need to deploy it across all major cities, and the shield's energy draw will be intense. We can't afford any mistakes." General Rios nodded. "We can't fail." The team quickly mobilized. The shield would be deployed in strategic locations, cities that were still intact, military hubs, and the last strongholds of resistance. The Vorith fleet had already begun its countdown, and Earth's final line of defense had to be ready to intercept the bomb before it could hit. Meanwhile, the world held its breath. In every corner of the globe, people braced for what was to come. The final battle for Earth had begun. Soldiers lined up, ready for the ultimate sacrifice. Civilians, those who had survived the worst of the attacks, gathered in underground bunkers, praying that the shield would hold. On the ground, Earth's military forces prepared for a massive, all-out assault on the Vorith fleet. Fighter jets, drones, and ground-based artillery systems were positioned for a coordinated strike. But Alina and her team knew that the most important action would take place in the skies as the final showdown occurred above Earth's atmosphere. The Vorith, still unaware of humanity's countermeasure, continued their assault. Waves of alien ships descended on Earth's capital cities, launching salvo after salvo of devastating energy beams. Their final weapon, a colossal bomb the size of a city block, was deployed and falling rapidly toward the Earth's surface. But then, just as the bomb was about to make contact, a flash of light erupted from Earth's defenses. The energy shield, powered by the hastily assembled technology, activated with an explosive force. The surrounding air crackled with energy as the shield expanded, covering entire continents with a shimmering dome of protection. For a moment, there was silence. The Vorith fleet hesitated, watching in disbelief as the energy shield held firm, absorbing the blast from their doomsday bomb. The weapon's energy began to dissipate, and the bomb, once a harbinger of certain doom, lost its power. It exploded harmlessly in midair, a burst of light and sound that rippled across the atmosphere. Alina stood, staring at the screen in shock and relief. "It worked," she whispered. But the victory was short-lived. The Vorith commanders, enraged by their failure, unleashed a counterattack. Their fleet launched hundreds of smaller, more powerful bombs, each designed to bypass the energy shield. But the Vorith had underestimated humanity's adaptability once again. The Resistance had already planned for this eventuality. A new wave of Earth's fighters launched into the skies. With the shield holding firm, they intercepted the Vorith bombs, disarming them mid-flight, while coordinated ground assaults began to wipe out the remaining Vorith forces. The enemy was no longer the overwhelming power they had once been. They were being pushed back, cornered in their own invasion. General Rios led the final charge, rallying soldiers as they stormed the Vorith's command ship. The war had come to its boiling point, and humanity's resolve was stronger than ever. The tide had turned, but the battle was not over. One final push was needed to end the war. The fate of Earth would be decided in the coming hours. The Vorith had suffered a devastating blow, but they were far from finished. The shield had neutralized their doomsday bomb, and the tide had shifted, but now their anger and desperation drove them to unleash everything they had left. With their fleet severely crippled and their command ship in disarray, the invaders began a full-on assault, throwing all remaining forces at Earth's defenses. General Alina Rios stood at the front lines, her eyes fixed on the skies. The air buzzed with activity as Earth's last remaining fighter jets and drones engaged in dogfights with the remaining Vorith ships. Explosions lit up the atmosphere, a deadly ballet of fire and debris as both sides fought furiously for dominance. "We have them on the ropes," General Rios said through a comms line to her commanders. "But this isn't over. They're coming for the final strike." Back in Earth's command center, Dr. Samuel Ruiz and Amelia Zhang were working frantically to keep the shield up, coordinating with the military forces to prepare for the last push. The energy required to maintain the shield was staggering. It could not last forever, and the Vorath knew it. They were adapting, finding ways to pierce the barrier with more focused energy weapons. It was only a matter of time before the shield would begin to crack. Amelia's fingers flew across her console, her brow furrowed with concentration. They're targeting the power grid. If we don't reroute the energy flow, the shield's going to drop within the hour. Dr. Ruiz paced nervously behind her, his mind racing. We can't let that happen. We have one shot, take out their flagship, and it's over. Elena, watching the chaos unfold on the battlefield, knew this was their final chance. Earth's remaining military forces had pushed the Vorath back, but the alien invaders were using everything at their disposal in a last-ditch attempt to break through. If the Vorath flagship, the Kavash, remained intact, it would lead a devastating assault that could wipe out the remaining resistance. The Kavash is our target, Elena ordered. We have to take it out. Now. Everyone. Full assault. This ends today. The final wave of Earth's soldiers moved with precision. Drones, tanks, and ground troops advanced on a critical point where the Vorath flagship had taken refuge in Earth's upper atmosphere. Fighter pilots, now veterans of countless battles, moved in formation, prepared for the most daring assault yet. Among them was Captain Javier Cruz, a seasoned veteran who had led many of the early skirmishes. He looked out the window of his fighter, seeing the wreckage of the previous battles. Parts of destroyed Vorath ships, scattered debris from fallen drones, and plumes of smoke rising from ruined cities. This was humanity's home, the planet they had fought for. The thought drove him forward. We're in position. Cruz's voice came through the comms. Prepare for the final assault. The ground shook as Earth's forces launched their attack on the Kavash. Fighter jets and missile-equipped drones shot through the air with pinpoint accuracy, targeting weak points in the alien ship's armor. On the ground, resistance troops advanced, firing at the Vorath's remaining ground forces and working their way toward the ship's docking bays. Aboard the Kavash, the Vorath commander scrambled to repel the attack. They had underestimated humanity's resilience for too long. But even now, with their forces dwindling, they held on to the belief that victory was still within their grasp. If they could maintain control of their flagship, the war was not yet lost. But as the battle raged on, it became evident that Earth's forces were more than capable of pulling off the impossible. As the Kavash began to fracture under the barrage, the last remnants of the Vorath fleet started to fall into disarray. Earth's military forces had the advantage, and they were seizing it. Target their energy core, General Rios commanded. We hit it now, and we end this war once and for all. A final coordinated strike hit the Kavash's core, igniting a massive explosion that sent shockwaves through the surrounding ships. The flagship, the heart of the Vorath invasion, was destroyed in a brilliant flash of light. As the massive ship disintegrated, the remaining Vorath forces were left with no leadership and no way to coordinate. Earth's victory was imminent, but there was still one more challenge. The final remnants of the Vorath fleet were now scattering, desperate to escape before they were wiped out. We've won, Dr. Ruiz said, voice shaking with disbelief. It's over. But Elena knew better. The final pieces of the puzzle were still in motion. The remaining Vorath forces were now retreating, but their technology was unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The war may have been won, but the true cost of the victory was still unknown. Humanity had faced the unimaginable and had risen to meet it, proving their strength against an enemy that believed they were invincible. But as the smoke of battle cleared and the dust began to settle, one question remained. What kind of world would emerge from the ashes of this war? Could Earth rebuild, or would the scars of this conflict shape the future forever? The aftermath of the battle was both triumphant and heartbreaking. Earth had won the war. The Vorath fleet had been shattered, their flagship Kavash obliterated in a brilliant explosion, and their invading forces were retreating into the void. Yet, as humanity stood victorious, the toll of the war was undeniable. Cities lay in ruins, millions of lives had been lost, and the world was scared by the brutal conflict. General Elena Rios walked through the remains of a city that had once been a bustling metropolis. The streets, now eerily silent, were filled with crumbled buildings and shattered glass. The signs of destruction were everywhere. Yet there was something else, a faint sense of resilience in the air. Humanity had endured, and in this broken world, they had survived. As Elena surveyed the destruction, Dr. Samuel Ruiz and Amelia Jong approached, their faces worn with exhaustion. "We did it," Dr. Ruiz said, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. "We stopped them." Amelia nodded. "We've proven that humanity can fight. We've proven that we're not just survivors, we're warriors. But it's not over. The real battle starts now." Elena looked at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to rise, casting a faint orange glow over the shattered landscape. "This is only the beginning. We have to rebuild. We have to restore what was lost." The rebuilding process began almost immediately. Nations that had been decimated by the war now came together, united in a way that had seemed impossible before. The resistance forces, soldiers, civilians, and scientists, who had fought side by side, began the monumental task of restoring infrastructure, rebuilding cities, and treating the wounded. There was no time to waste. Earth's economy, communications, and global networks were in ruins, but humanity's spirit was intact. While the world began to recover, a new sense of collaboration emerged. The once fractured nations of Earth set aside their old divisions, forming a united global alliance. The war had forced them to recognize the importance of cooperation, not just among themselves, but with the knowledge and technology they had gained from the alien invasion. In the aftermath, former adversaries worked together to rebuild society. Old rivalries faded in the face of a common goal: survival and rebuilding a future free of fear. Amelia and Dr. Ruiz were at the forefront of humanity's scientific renaissance. The knowledge taken from the Vorath technology, though initially a tool for destruction, now became the key to innovation. Researchers began to study the alien technology, adapting it to improve life on Earth. Energy systems, medical advancements, and space exploration were all revolutionized by the newfound knowledge. But the rebuilding process was not without challenges. The scars of war ran deep, and there was still a lingering fear that the Vorath could return. The memories of the invasion were fresh in everyone's mind, and there were whispers of new weapons being developed, some with the potential to defend Earth from another extraterrestrial threat. Yet these conversations were often filled with hope as much as they were with anxiety. General Rios stood before a memorial, a stone monument erected in honor of the fallen soldiers and civilians who had made the ultimate sacrifice. It was a solemn moment, one where she could reflect on the human cost of the victory. The names etched in the stone were a reminder that, even in victory, there had been losses too great to ever truly be counted. "We did what we had to do," Elena whispered to herself. "But the true fight is still ahead." As humanity picked up the pieces of its shattered world, the question loomed: could they ensure that the horrors of the invasion would never happen again? Would humanity, united in the wake of catastrophe, be able to protect the fragile peace they had earned? Or would the scars of war push them into new conflicts, dividing them once more? The day after the final battle, as the world held its collective breath, a message came through the newly restored global communication networks. It was not from Earth, but from the stars. A signal, encrypted and strange, had been intercepted by the newly formed Earth Defense Network. It was clear: the Vorath had not come alone. This revelation sent a chill down Elena's spine. There were other civilizations out there, other species that could be just as ruthless as the Vorath. The fight for Earth might be over, but the fight for humanity's place in the cosmos was only beginning. As the sun rose higher, Earth's leaders stood together, watching the horizon. There was still so much to be done, so much to rebuild. But for the first time in a long while, they faced the future with hope. The world had survived the impossible, and the human spirit had been tested and proven strong. The true war for humanity's future had only just begun. In the weeks that followed the destruction of the Vorith fleet, the world began to slowly heal. Amidst the ruins of cities, a new global alliance formed from the ashes of the old. Former enemies, nations that had once been locked in bitter conflict, now worked together in the shared pursuit of survival and reconstruction. The devastation of war had united humanity in a way that no peace treaty could ever have achieved. The message was clear: only together would they stand a chance in the future, whatever it might bring. General Elena Rios stood before the newly established United Earth Council, a representative body made up of former world leaders, military commanders, and resistance figures from all walks of life. Their mission was clear: to prevent future invasions, protect humanity, and ensure that the mistakes of the past were not repeated. "This is a new era for humanity," Elena said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "The war we fought against the Vorith showed us our strength, but it also exposed our vulnerabilities. We are not alone in this universe, and we must be ready for what lies beyond our planet. Our greatest strength now is unity. We will build a future where our children never have to know the horrors of war." Her words were met with applause, but there was a deep, lingering unease in the room. The victory had been hard won, and the scars of the conflict were not easily erased. The leaders of the new Earth government knew that, while they had pushed the Vorith back, they were far from out of danger. The signal intercepted just days after the war had ended, a warning of other alien civilizations potentially hostile to Earth, still hung over their heads like a dark cloud. "We have only one chance," Dr. Samuel Roos said later, speaking to Elena in private. "The Vorith were just the beginning. This galaxy is full of dangers, and if we are to survive, we must strengthen ourselves. We need to develop new weapons, yes, but we also need allies. We need to reach out to the stars." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "We cannot afford to repeat the mistakes of the past. We need to find a way to communicate with other races, to form alliances before we're forced into another war." The next few months saw a flurry of activity as Earth's leaders turned their attention to space exploration. The technology the Vorith had left behind, though incomplete and dangerous in some respects, offered humanity the keys to the stars. Human engineers and scientists, aided by the knowledge of the alien machines, began to rebuild Earth's space fleets, focusing on deep space travel and long-range communication systems. Amelia Zhang, who had been instrumental in cracking the Vorith's communication codes, led the initiative to send out peaceful signals into space, hoping to contact any alien civilization willing to communicate. There were many debates, some calling for caution, others demanding that humanity take a more aggressive stance, but the decision was made. The time for isolation was over. As the first deep space probes were launched, humanity waited, hoping to make contact with a race willing to share knowledge and help guard against future threats. The probes were equipped with messages of peace, extending an olive branch to the cosmos. But Earth's hope for peace was tested sooner than expected. A year after the defeat of the Vorith, a strange vessel appeared on Earth's radar, vastly different from any technology humanity had encountered. Its design was unlike anything from the Vorith, and it came from a direction in space where no known star system existed. The new ship, while still light years away, was clearly on a direct course for Earth. Communication systems fell silent as Earth's defense network scrambled to decipher the unfamiliar technology. This was no accidental encounter. General Rios, now leading Earth's military operations as well as its diplomacy efforts, was immediately alerted. "What is it?" she demanded of her officers. "Who are they?" Amelia's voice crackled over the radio. "It's not a Vorith ship, Elena. This is something entirely different. We've never seen anything like it. The unknown ship was not hostile, not yet, but the message it sent was unmistakable. We are watching you." A chill ran down Elena's spine. Humanity had just come out of one war, but now it faced the unknown again. There was no sign of an invasion, no weapons, no threatening gestures. Yet, the implications were clear. Earth was not alone in the universe, and the galaxy was full of beings who were aware of their existence. The new dawn that had begun with the fall of the Vorath was now clouded with uncertainty. Humanity had rebuilt, but it had also awakened something in the cosmos. The victory over the Vorath had proven Earth's strength, but the true test was yet to come. Would humanity face this new threat with the same resilience and courage that had defined them in the past? Or would the weight of the unknown drive them to the brink of extinction once more? As the mysterious ship continued its slow approach toward Earth, one thing was clear. Humanity was about to face its greatest challenge yet. This time, they would need more than just survival instinct. They would need to prove they had learned from the past and were ready for the future.